All right, so we've got a really fun one today. Someone sent in some interesting research, and we're going to dive into it. And the question is, are blondes really dumb?
Ooh.
You know the stereotype, right? Legally blind, all those jokes.
Yeah, it's so pervasive.
It's everywhere, right? But is there any truth to it?
Right.
Well, this 2016 research paper from the journal Economics Bulletin, titled Are Blondes Really Dumb? By J. L. Zagorski, aims to find out.
Wow, that's a very direct title.
Yeah, it gets right to the point. And so I'm curious to unpack this with you.
Yeah.
It is pretty amazing how much that stereotype persists. You know, it's not just harmless fun, right?
Right.
Like these stereotypes can actually have real world impacts on how people are perceived and treated.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it affects hiring, promotions,
Yeah.
social interactions, all kinds of things.
Absolutely. So let's get into how Zagorski tackled this. I'm curious about the methodology. What did he use?
Well, he used data from a really huge survey called the National Longitudinal Survey of Youth, 1979, or NLSY
Oh,
75.
ISY70.
Yeah, they've been following this massive group of people since they were teenagers,
Wow.
and they track all sorts of data about their lives, including intelligence.
That's going to be like a gold mine of information for researchers.
Oh, it's incredible, the stuff you can learn from a study like that.
Okay, so, but how do you measure intelligence in a study like this? What are they looking at?
Right. Well, in this case, Zagorski used scores from the Armed Forces Qualification Test, or the AFQT.
Okay.
It's a standardized test that the military uses, and it's considered like a pretty reliable indicator of general intelligence.
So, pretty solid measure, though.
Yeah, pretty solid.
And just to clarify, this research focused specifically on data from 1985, and they were looking at white men and women to avoid any bias related to race or ethnicity.
Exactly. Trying to control for those factors.
Okay, so what did Zagorski discover when he looked at all of this data?
Okay, so get this. Blonde women in the study actually had a higher average IQ than women with brown, red, or black hair.
Wait a minute, are you serious? The stereotype is totally busted.
It is completely busted. And keep in mind, we're talking about a large, nationally representative sample. So it's pretty compelling evidence against the dumb blonde stereotype.
Wow, that's a huge finding. It really flips the script, doesn't
It
it?
really does.
But why might this be the case? You know, the study mentions that blonde women in the sample had greater access to magazines, newspapers, and library cards at age 14. So is that
Mm.
something that might play into this?
It could be.
Yeah.
That finding suggests that maybe blonde women in this sample had home environments that provided more intellectual stimulation,
Right.
and that could have contributed to higher IQ scores later on.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's not just about genetics, right?
Right,
Our,
exactly.
our experiences, our environment plays a huge role too.
Absolutely. So it's
Yeah.
not nature versus nurture, it's both.
It's both, and it does make you wonder. I mean, if blondes had more access to these resources, does that point to maybe some sort of socioeconomic factor being involved as well?
Yeah, that's a great point. Definitely raises some questions about socioeconomic background and how that might be contributing to these results.
Definitely something to think about. Okay, so blonde women not only had a higher average IQ, but let's dig a little deeper into the distribution of those scores. What did Zagorski find there?
Okay, so this is where it gets even more interesting. Blonde women actually had the lowest percentage of individuals who scored significantly below average.
So they're not just scoring higher on average, they're also less likely to be on the lower end of the intelligence spectrum.
Exactly.
Interesting. What about the other end of the spectrum? What did he find there?
Well, on the flip side, blonde women were more likely to be classified as having exceptionally high intelligence compared to women with other hair colors.
So not only is the stereotype wrong, it's almost like the opposite of reality.
It really is.
What does this tell us about stereotypes in general?
I think it really underscores how powerful and pervasive and sometimes really harmful stereotypes can be. We make
Mhm.
these assumptions based on appearances without really considering the evidence.
Yeah, and this study really drives that point home, like don't judge a book by its cover.
Exactly.
Individual differences matter way more than these superficial traits.
Right. And we should focus on what's on the inside, not just the outside.
Couldn't agree more. But speaking of assumptions based on appearance, this research also made me think about this whole concept of the economics of beauty.
Oh, yeah, that's a fascinating area.
What are your thoughts on that? Yeah, it's fascinating to think about how looks can actually like impact someone's, economic opportunities.
Right.
What does the research say about that?
Well, there's this whole field of study called the economics of beauty, which looks at how physical attractiveness can influence things like, you know, wages, job prospects, even access to loans.
Really?
And some studies have suggested that more attractive people tend to have an advantage in those areas.
It is a little unsettling to think about.
It is kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah, like you're telling me just being good looking can put more money in your pocket.
Yeah, basically, right?
Well, some studies point in that direction.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's complicated. There's a lot of variables.
Right.
And that's where Zagorski's research adds this like really interesting layer.
Okay.
Because if blonde women are often perceived as more attractive, and they also have these higher average IQ scores,
Right.
it makes you wonder, are those potential earnings just about beauty, or is intelligence playing a role too?
Yeah, you're totally right. It kind of muddies the waters a bit, right?
It does, yeah.
Like, is it truly a beauty premium or is it a combination of beauty and brains?
Exactly. And Zagorski actually argues that some of the economic benefits that other studies have attributed to beauty might actually be tied to intelligence instead.
Oh, wow. So are we saying that it's not just about looks, it's about smarts too?
That's what the research seems to suggest. Yeah, it challenges that traditional idea of a simple beauty premium.
So how do we disentangle those two things, you know? How do we figure out how much each factor contributes to that so-called beauty premium?
That's the million-dollar question. And honestly, it really highlights the need for more research in this area. Future studies on the economics of beauty should really include measures of both attractiveness and intelligence.
Yeah, to get the full picture.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We can't just focus on looks alone.
Makes sense. We need to consider the whole package, not just one element. And it's amazing to me how this one research paper about, blonde women and IQ scores
Yeah.
has opened up like all these other avenues of inquiry.
Right. It's true. It shows how research, takes us down these unexpected paths and challenges our assumptions about the world.
Totally. So before we wrap up, I think it's important to point out that this particular study focused on a specific group of people, white men and women from the baby boomer generation.
That's an important point. Yeah. And because of that, we need to be cautious about generalizing these findings to the entire population.
Right.
More research is needed to see if these patterns hold true for other racial and ethnic groups,
Yeah.
as well as, younger generations. We can't just assume everyone fits into the same mold.
Well, of course, every study has its limitations, right? And there's always more to learn.
Always.
But this deep dive has definitely given us a lot to think about. We learned that the dumb blonde stereotype is completely baseless.
Right.
Blonde women in this study actually had higher average IQ scores than women with other hair colors.
And we even explored how those findings might change our understanding of the economics of beauty,
Yeah.
suggesting that intelligence could be a much bigger factor than we thought.
It really makes you wonder, huh?
It does.
It feels like we're just scratching the surface of this huge conversation about stereotypes and intelligence and how we perceive each other.
Oh, absolutely. There's so much more to explore here. And I think maybe the most important thing for our listeners today is just to stay curious.
Yeah.
Keep questioning those assumptions. And remember that stereotypes rarely tell the whole story.
So well said. And you know what question is lingering in my mind right now? If blondes aren't actually dumb, then do they really have more fun? That's the question I keep coming back to.
The age-old question, right?
Yeah.
This research doesn't directly address the fun factor, but
Right.
makes you wonder if there's something else at play here
Total sense.
beyond just, IQ scores.
Yeah, like maybe intelligence,
Huh.
plays a role in confidence or social skills or something,
Uh-huh.
which could then lead to having more fun. Who knows?
Yeah, and that would be a fascinating area for future research, I think.
Right.
Imagine a study that combines IQ data with, maybe measures of social engagement or risk-taking, or even like self-reported happiness,
Oh, that would be cool.
to see if there's any connection there.
That's a study I would love to read.
Yeah, me too.
It feels like we're just starting to peel back the layers of this whole thing, this connection between, hair color and stereotypes and how we perceive intelligence and success.
Yeah, it's really complex and fascinating.
It is, and I think the biggest takeaway for our listeners today is this. Stay curious.
Yeah.
Keep questioning those assumptions and remember that stereotypes very rarely paint the full picture.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
There's always more to the story.
Always.
So next time someone cracks a dumb blonde joke, you can confidently say, actually, research suggests that.
Blondes might just surprise you.
Exactly. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll catch you next time for another fascinating exploration.